The first cabinet of this new council. Good to see many people here today. It's a shame that such terrible events have happened over the last couple of weeks. A terrible situation, and I would normally ask for a minute's silence in those situations to recognise the atrocities that happened in Manchester and recently in London, but we, as you know, we all as a council observed a silence yesterday, but our thoughts and prayers remain with all those who have been so terribly affected, and it's an absolute horrendous situation, and as I say, our thoughts will remain with those affected for a long time to come. But can I welcome you once again, and also welcome my new cabinet. And I'm really pleased that we have such a good, talented new cabinet. And I'm really pleased that I have been re-elected as leader by the council. Sorry, Simon. Did you want to?
Yeah. Can I just? On behalf of Cabinet, welcome and good afternoon to you all. And it doesn't seem as though we've been away, does it? I think you reflected very well there, Leader, on what's happened over the last few weeks and what's been happening for some time. As group leader with Dimitri, and I'm sure with Linda, would you, as leader of the council, on our behalf, write to the Mayor of Manchester and to the Mayor of London on behalf of the residents of Monmouthshire County Council, with all them kind words that we can offer to them, and our solidarity as a country, which we have, and as Wales, it does unite people together and brings people together. As a northern lad as well, and with people from that area, it is a very, very sad time for them. But as we saw on Sunday, actually them young people are so brave, and what they've been through, and we don't know what they've been through, and some of them must have seen some horrific sights. Would you kindly write to them, to people in them positions on behalf of us, please, Leader?
Thank you, Simon. We've already prepared statements in both situations, and the previous terrible situation in London on Westminster Bridge some few months ago. But absolutely take your sentiments on board, and we will make sure that the council's sentiments are passed on to the mayors of the appropriate cities. Okay. Thank you for that, Simon. And can I first of all then once again welcome you, but also introduce myself. For those of you at home who may be watching in or may in the future, welcome as well. And to introduce myself, I'm Peter Fox, leader of the council. I'm going to invite my new colleagues to this new cabinet to introduce themselves as well. Could I start on my left then, Bob, please?
Yeah, Bob Greenland, Deputy Leader.
Penny Jones, Cabinet Member for Social Services, Safeguarding and Public Health.
Sarah Jones, Cabinet Member for Social Justice and Community Development.
Paul Jordan, Cabinet Member for Governance.
Phil Murphy, Cabinet Member for Resources.
Richard John, Cabinet Member for Children and Young People.
Thank you very much. Can I welcome my four new colleagues here to their first full cabinet meeting. Obviously, we have some past members, and I'm really pleased that they've agreed to come back into cabinet. I think things bode really well for the future of this council, for this administration. We have some excellent talent joined this council across all political groups, and we look really forward to working with everyone going forward. There's some massive challenges ahead of us in many areas, and we realise that, and we will be facing those challenges over the next coming months and years, and hopefully to find a long-term sustainable solution for high-quality services in Monmouthshire. We've always been proud to maintain that situation, and we want to continue along that vein. Can I invite my colleague opposition leaders to introduce themselves, please?
Dimitri Petrini, leader of the Labour Group.
Councillor Simon Howarth, leader of the Independents.
Linda Guppy, leader of Liberal Democrats.
Can I also welcome you today, and Linda, especially in your new role as leader of the Liberal group. Welcome, and we look forward to your contributions as well. For those looking in at home, this is probably one of the only cabinets in Wales which actually gives the opportunity for opposition leaders to contribute, and we've welcomed that, and we've always welcomed your challenge. It's been challenging at times, and let's keep that going. I think it's healthy and it's good for democracy here in Monmouthshire. Okay, we are joined by many officers today. Can I thank you all for attending? And perhaps if you were asked to contribute, if you could introduce yourselves, that'd be very welcome. Okay, let's move into our first agenda. We move on to the first item, apologies for absence. We're clearly all here. So item 2, declarations of interest. With declarations of interest, if you have one, please say now. And if you come across one as we work through the agenda, please signal, and you can declare verbally. But please remember that we also need to capture your interest on the performer provided. Okay, any declarations of interest today? Okay, fine. If you find one as you go through, as I just said, please declare it then. We have no reports from select committees at this time to consider. I'm sure the new select committees have got a heavy agenda ahead of them, and I'm expecting to see things come forward, no doubt, in the future. So we'll move into item 4 and consider the following reports. And the first one is the Welsh Language Monitoring Report. Councillor Sarah Jones.
Thank you, Leader. So the report you've got in front of you today, it's recommended that you note the report. This report, we have a statutory duty to report back to the Welsh Language Commission on our progress against 4 of the 176 standards that have come out and been born out of the Welsh language measure. So those 4 standards are outlined in this report. The report mirrors the template of what we produced last year, which was the first year of reporting back against these 4 standards. All local authorities in Wales have to adhere to this, and the template will be pretty much standard across all the 22 local authorities. So the data required for the period, the reporting period, which was 1st of March to the 31st of March, 1st of April last year to the 31st of March this year. It's information on complaints, information on staff language skills, Welsh medium training for staff, and recruiting to empty posts. So in addition to the report that you've got in front of you today, the Welsh Language Commission will now come and meet us annually to discuss our progress against the report that you have, which is going to them, but also in terms of some of the other measurements that they make against our standards. Those include an annual mystery shopper survey, which they conduct and do that Wales-wide as well as in Monmouthshire alone. We also commission our own mystery shopper survey through the local Mentor Iaith language enterprise for the local area. And you will also note that independently to the report that's in front of you today that goes to the Welsh Language Commissioner, we do have our own Welsh language strategy, and that was adopted by Council in January this year. So the report is very much just for you to note and to recommend that report goes forward to the Welsh Language Commissioner as agreed as it stands.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. We have Alan Burkett here today. Anything further you wish to add, Alan?
No, that's fine. I think Sarah's covered it adequately there. It's a new process. I mean, we did it last year, and we think this is what they're going to stick with now. They tend to sort of, they'll do some one-off bespoke pieces of work with, say, they look at it, the internet, the website. They may look at elections and so on. So they come up with specific pieces of work they want to do, but essentially they look at what we got here, and the mystery shopper is the way they analyse that we're sort of in compliance with the standard.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Thanks for the work that's been going on throughout the year and the contributions made by many of our staff and their willingness to embrace the standards. And it is a challenge. It's more of a challenge in an anglicised county, more as Monmouthshire is. But we have embraced the requirement and seem to be doing well. Colleagues, is there anybody who wish to add further to this report? Any points? No? Dimitri, any points on this one? Simon, any points you wish? Linda?
No, just in view of last year, Eisteddfod, that may sort of put us forward to be looking at it as a positive way of fulfilling this policy document, really, and just look forward for the feedback that we get from meeting this vast number of standards. That's all.
Well, thank you for that. Okay, so thank you, Sarah. The recommendation then in 2.1 is to approve the report as a record of the Council's activities over the last year in respect of compliance with the Welsh language standards. The report will then be forwarded to the Welsh Language Commissioner's Office by the 30th of June for their scrutiny, response and formal approval. It will also be posted on the Council's website in both English and Welsh. So, all in favour of that recommendation? Great, thank you very much. Move us on then to the corporate safeguarding policy. Councillor Penny-Jones.
Thank you, Leader. This regards the corporate safeguarding policy, which was last implemented in the last one was implemented in 2013, but in March this year it was advised that a revised safeguarding policy should be brought forward for approval, and this is it. It's very much in draft form at the moment and has to go through scrutiny as well. Really, it's all about focusing on all parts of the organisation, including volunteers and those commissioned to undertake work on behalf of the council. Previously, it emphasised safeguarding in education and with young people. Now it incorporates all aspects of the council. So it's also working to undertake, on behalf of the council, all of whom are expected to understand their responsibility and, where necessary, to take action to safeguard and promote the welfare of vulnerable people. The Social Services and Wellbeing Act 2014 aims to strengthen and build on existing safeguarding practice in Wales to ensure that all people live a lively and full and safe life. Safeguarding children and adults at risk from abuse is everybody's responsibility, and the Council's workforce shares a responsibility both collectively and individually to ensure children and adults at risk are protected from harm. Members will be aware, reading the report, that the safeguarding focuses on the 5 priority areas: good governance, safe workforce, preventative approach, robust protection and safe services. The policy is set out in line with the above priority areas in mind, and then it provides for a clear and robust governance framework at officer and member level, as well as outlining the role of the regional boards. It really provides an audit tool framework for self-evaluation and clearly sets out roles and responsibilities for all staff and councillors. So it really is an important piece of work for every member and every member's staff. The policy gives clear guidelines on providing a safe workforce, the training expected of all staff, and the preventative approaches which establish a positive culture of safeguarding within the council. It also adheres to the principles of partnership, which is particularly important in promoting prevention and early intervention. For example, something that's quite current: counter-terrorism, child sexual exploitation, and of course violence against women. I think that's it. Okay. I'll leave it open for any questions.
Thank you, Penny, for taking us through that. I have to say, what an excellent report this is, and thank you, Claire. Claire, is there anything you wish to add?
Just to say very briefly, Leader, that I'm aware that members as part of the induction programme haven't had their safeguarding training yet. That's scheduled for the 4th of July, so an encouragement across all parties for members across the board to undertake that safeguarding training. And then second, just to say this is a very significant policy for the Council and the first time in which adults at risk and safeguarding children have been within that same policy context, so very significant for Council eventually to consider in that context.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. And yeah, I can see this is a more embracing policy, which is really welcomed. I recognise in the framework there that the requirement of councillors to obviously have an understanding of basic awareness, but and I note then that level 1 training is provided to those members who might have more an interface with children. I would suggest that that probably would encourage all councillors to do level 1. I don't know if you'd agree with it, yeah. But because, we come across and we interface with young people in many, many forums, and I just think it would be right too that they have that deeper understanding. I think the report's really useful too. It's very clear and concise about what's expected of individuals as well, and that's really helpful. So we welcome the report and welcome the policy. Colleagues, anybody?
Through you, Peter, when we come to safeguarding training for members, will part of that training encompass case studies, reports? Because whilst this report is very comprehensive and there are parts of it that take you on to other areas for the pro forma for reporting, when you go into that, it's 3 times bigger than your report itself. I think members need to know how to actually make that report should they come across an appropriate situation.
Yeah, absolutely. The level 1 training that will be delivered to all members, and that should have been clear in the report that it is to all members and all members of staff indeed who need that level 1 training, need to understand their very basic responsibilities around reporting concerns, and then obviously those professionals who are there to consider those concerns will do that appropriately and have got the right training in order to do so. So the training will be level 1 for safeguarding children and safeguarding adults at risk, and hopefully coming out of that training, and we'll test that out, members will understand what they need to do and what their responsibilities are.
Thank you, Claire, and look forward to that. Right, leaders, Dimitri.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Couple of questions. First one is on finances. One is that basically any costs will be incurred within budget. Could we have any bigger or like a more accurate picture of what costs will be? I mean, it's a great report, we need it, but having an idea of how much it costs and how much the budget needs to absorb, and the pressures that will have on their budget will be useful to opposition leaders. Secondly, is this report pushed through because of the Curbcraft failures? I'll put it in those strong terms on safeguarding. Why isn't it taking so long to have such a comprehensive framework? I've been a councillor, this is what, 6th year now we've got this, which is a bit worrying. Just going to get some reassurance on that would be great. On the cabinet member, it says safeguarding will regularly meet with the chief officer. That's fine, but can I have more, like how regular? Every month, once a year, every council term? Kind of more accuracy on what that actually means in practice, because it's a bit vague, a bit amorphous. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri. Claire, did you want to talk about finance? Well, touch on any of those points if you wish.
Yeah, of course. The safeguarding unit itself obviously has a budget, and we've recently strengthened the safeguarding unit in 2 ways. We have got more of a business approach with a programme lead within the safeguarding unit, who's Kath Sheen, who's in the chamber today. And we've also recently reinstated the safeguarding service manager. Prior to that, we had the service manager responsibility for the safeguarding unit in another service manager portfolio. And we recognised that we needed a service manager who was focused purely on that role of the safeguarding unit, particularly as we integrate adult safeguarding into our whole authority safeguarding arrangements. The timing of the policy is to reflect the legislative changes that there have been. So with the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, which came in from the start of the last financial year, there are now statutory responsibilities on us for safeguarding adults at risk, which are the same largely legislative duties that we have around safeguarding children. So it was very important to refresh and to review the policy in light of the fact that the Social Service and Wellbeing Act had placed adult safeguarding on a different level. And in terms of one-to-ones, they are as often as they need to be, at least monthly between Chief Officer and the executive member. But if they need to be more frequent because issues arise, then obviously they do take place more frequently.
And I think there has been a policy in place, as you'll see in the fourth bullet point, down on 3, Dimitri, and that bullet point clearly states that that safeguarding policy has been in place, but it was heavily focused towards educational settings and other child and family services, and whilst it was embedded in. And safeguarding has been embedded well in many areas. There are other areas which it wasn't embedded in, and I acknowledge that. And hopefully this policy gives a real tool for the organisation to make sure that that we can expect the same quality of safeguarding in all parts of the council. Sorry, Penny, do you want to come in? Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'd just like to reassure Dimitri and all the members, in fact, that I've already established meetings with the safeguarding officers, but with Claire and myself, the Chief Officer and myself, we're talking today about the requirement for the number of meetings we would have, and we've agreed that we really want to keep at least monthly meetings going for many different areas. So I can reassure you that we will be meeting very regularly, and more so if required.
Simon?
I just want to pick up on the produce an annual report, and it's on page 30 for SLT, Cabinet and Relevant Scrutiny Committees. Would that be a report which would be looking at altering the policy, or would that just be an updated report? Because this is a live document, it will be a living document. Once it's gone through scrutiny, it will come back to yourselves as Cabinet to rubber stamp this. It's saying produce an annual report for SLT, Cabinet and Relevant Scrutiny Committees. That's a yearly. What would you be looking for from that as Cabinet member? It's on page 30. It's just it's saying we are going to actually update and look at this yearly. What would you be looking for from that? Because it's took us so long to get here from the last one.
Yes.
You're on about now, every year, we're going to actually get hold of this and go through it.
Well, there will be an annual meeting of the whole authority safeguarding group to start with, and that would have to be scrutinised and looked at. But also the line of sight goes through the service improvement plans as well. So, and the safeguarding audit framework for evaluation SAFE will be taken into account. So there are lots of kind of areas of scrutiny and monitoring. And really, I think we've got to make sure that we look at any data that we have, that any problems that may have arisen, and look at our policy in relation to those. So we will be keeping an eye on it.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Simon, some of us were struggling to find your page. You say page 30 of the safeguarding policy itself, did you say? Appendix 4. Oh, that's right. Up on our machines, Appendix 4. Okay, Appendix 4, terms of reference on page 29. Yeah, sorry, it's just confusing, are you? Okay. So everybody got that now, so you can see where Simon was going? Okay. Claire, did you want to come in? Sorry.
Yeah, just to say what we've brought to Cabinet Council through select committees routinely, and would be at least annually, but it's been at least 6 monthly really, are safeguarding progress reports in which we self-evaluate and use the evidence and the data to advise and to be challenged on where we see ourselves in terms of our safeguarding performance, and we would continue to do that. The policy will be reviewed as and when it needs to, if there is a significant legislative change or some other requirement to do that. Otherwise, it would be a policy which would be recommended to Council for at least a 3-year period.
Thank you, Claire. Linda?
Well, I can see that this is an extension of our previous policy that encapsulates everything to do with safeguarding and response to the new 2014 Act. Just on Appendix 1, really, relevant contacts, just to note that you've got the duty team, but that's the out of hours. You've got the out of hours phone number and not the daytime number. And I didn't know if it would help that you put the times of council opening, because some people open at 8 o'clock, but this council you can't get through till 9 o'clock, and I think that's quite pertinent. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Linda. That's helpful. Okay, so
Sorry, Peter, can I just come in?
Sorry.
It says about all members need level 1 training. I think you have to take the individual members of what's required, because certainly my other job is a professional and I won't undertake level 1 training. I have to take level 3 training, so it supersedes level 1 training, which as long as it's current, I think. So I I think each individual member needs to be assessed on their need, level 1 or higher.
Absolutely agree. It needs to be appropriate. Okay, right. So the recommendation then on to is that it is recommended that members agree and adopt the corporate safeguarding policy. All in favour of that? Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, Claire. And we move on to the next report, and that's the Children and Young People's Restructure. Councillor Richard John.
Thank you, Leader. This report proposes some structural changes in the Children and Young People Directorate. It's honouring a pre-existing commitment to identify just over £70,000 of savings in this financial year. As you'll see from the report, these are changes not to frontline services, but to support services and administrative roles within the Directorate. It's also an opportunity to make other changes to ensure our Directorate is fit for purpose, by bringing admissions services together, and also by creating a new Band I post in additional learning needs. Can I thank Nikki Wellington and Sharon Randall-Smith for their work on this. It's also fulfilling our commitment to maintain frontline services, live within our means, and also make sure we're not passing on too much of a burden onto council taxpayers.
Thank you, Richard. Welcome the report. I think the restructure was clearly due and needed, and we recognise the investment in additional learning needs. That's important, especially if it can actually start bringing more of our young people back into county. That is a massive plus which we need to be striving for. So a welcome report. Colleagues, anybody wish to add anything? No. No. Will, is there anything you wanted to add? No. Or Sharon, anything? No. Right. Nikki? No. Okay, right. Dimitri.
Major concern is the burden placed on the professionals and expertise. With taking away admin staff, it's an easy sell for get rid of those staff, and then we make efficiency savings. But the professionals who deliver the frontline services are then burdened with workload and paperwork that can dominate a huge amount of their time. And rather than doing what the job we want them to do, they're forever doing paperwork, which is a bugbear of, I suppose, many managers. So how do you think there'll be a reduction in quality of service, overburdening of staff in this area, considering the pressures they're already under?
Yeah, we've got some very difficult decisions to make, but we've chosen the decision. We've got to make these financial savings. We don't want to make them on the front line. We want to save them from administrative roles. The alternative is we cut teacher numbers. We don't want to do that. We've made the choice to streamline our services. Behind the scenes, we think we can make those work more effectively. So you'll see in the report the point about enabling us to improve services for additional learning needs, and to try to keep more children within the county to improve provision there. And that's obviously going to deliver more savings as well. So it's not just about identifying the savings, it's about improving the service as well. But these are difficult decisions, and we've got to draw the line somewhere.
Will there be a knock-on? I think perhaps Nikki might want to reflect, or Sharon reflect on, is this additional burden on the frontline staff who are going to have to pick up admin type work as a result of any of these changes? I don't know if officers want to reflect a little on that, or will.
Yeah, happy to respond. Nikki Wellington, Finance Manager for CYP. We've looked at this structure long and hard over a number of months, and what we have seen within CYP is where we have skill gaps, and what we have done is we haven't had a restructure in CYP for many, many years, and as you know, roles have changed, and as you know, the services at CYP have changed. This restructure has enabled us to put the skills where we need the skills. We are not anticipating any additional burden for frontline staff. Everybody has been consulted and they are aware of the changes that we're putting through on this proposal. Don't know if there's anything you want to add, Sharon?
Just to say that, you know, recently we have benefited from investment from the local authority with regard to access to IT across all of our schools, and in the past that would have been something that would have caused quite a lot of additional paperwork. Now we're able to log on wherever we are, and therefore that move from paper-based to electronic-based certainly will help us and is going to reduce that burden on staff inevitably.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, Simon. Oh, Will, did you want to go in? Sorry, Will.
Thank you, Leader. Will McLean, Chief Officer, Children and Young People. I think one of the really important points in this paper is the investment that we can see made in that band I post for the additional learning needs. As members will be aware, the Welsh Government is progressing a new bill around additional learning needs. There will be a significant change in the way that we have to provide the paperwork and the plans and so on for those children who do need additional support in schools. And actually, rather than taking support from the front line, investing in this type of role actually provides more support for teachers. We're in the process now of concluding our additional learning needs review. And this type of higher grade post, which is more able to contribute to those discussions and debates with our lead Elencos in the schools, will actually make things easier for people rather than more hardship.
Right. Well, welcome that, and hopefully that satisfies your point, Dimitri. Simon?
Yeah, I think many have concerns over this document, and I know within last budgets and the budget before, we did actually, ALN, we did cut the funding to the team there. And I think the pressures put on the schools with what they're having to do as well isn't healthy. How will you measure the outcomes now, Will, of this process, of this impact of this document on what we're going to do here?
I think there are the two key aspects around this are around our admissions work and around our work to support those children with additional learning needs. With regards to the school access, that is becoming an area of work where there is additional pressures. We have seen unprecedented numbers of appeals this year for people trying to access our schools, both at primary and at secondary level. And that is something that we need to recognise. So again, increasing the level of the officers in that area will actually be of real support to them. We are very fortunate to have an excellent manager there at the moment. He works very well with our schools. It's a real challenge for us with our schools to find that balance. Obviously, schools want their children to be taught in their local communities, but sometimes the nature of the school estate makes that quite difficult. So that's part of the education strategic review we've been talking about, how we look at that, how we look at the provision of spaces across the county, and how we address our surplus places, because we still have a level of surplus places across our schools. So we'll be able to see there that we're able to manage that access process more effectively in the future. With regards to additional learning needs, it really is a period of significant change as we move from having statements, School Action Plus, and so on, to a process of having individual development plans, we will see a large-scale change in the way that we operate with ALN with our schools. We are expecting to see significant changes as our 2 new secondary schools are brought online, both with significant special needs resource bases. So there'll be a huge amount of change in the way that we're expected to work and in the way in which we relate to our schools. So I think that will be a period of change and challenge. The Welsh Government have set aside £20 million to manage that process of change. And Welsh Government are consulting at the moment in terms of some additional regional support for that. So we'll be working closely with that. But it will be quite difficult to set a very clear baseline now as to understand the impact, because the whole system is changing to such a significant extent.
Yeah, thank you, Will. Linda?
No, there's a lot of discussion around additional learning needs, but perhaps somebody could ask the question, you know, reducing whole-time equivalent administrative staff to psychology services. What they've been left with, and who are they catering? How many staff are they catering?
Sharon Randall-Smith. There is no reduction to any of the educational psychology team at all. The admin at the moment is essentially a function of collating information and then being able to distribute that to the educational psychologists to support their work. As we move to electronic systems, that will inevitably be saved within one place that can be accessed very easily by anyone concerned with that information. And we will have the opportunity to be able to share that with appropriate multi-agency people and colleagues in order to best meet a wider range of needs and identify issues at an early stage in a way that we just can't do at the moment.
Thank you, Sharon.
Peter,
Sorry, Linda, do you want to come back?
That didn't answer my question. I know that you're not getting rid of any psychology staff, but there's a deletion of administration staff within the psychology services. So what administrative support is there, and how many are they supporting? That's what.
The administrative support for educational psychology supports the educational psychologists in as much as the filing and the organising of the information and some letter writing. The letters are standard, and therefore we have models that we can use in order to be able to send those out. The burden on the educational psychologists should be quite minimal, particularly as we move, as I said, to having better systems for filing and organising information and sharing it widely.
Thank you for that, Sharon. Look forward to the ALN review. It's been a long time coming, and I know it will be welcome, because the old just throwing money at ALN doesn't always deliver what we need, and I know that's a traditional method around or perception that you throw money at something and it gets a better service, but it's not the case. I think the ALN will set us right on a sustainable future for ALN. Did you anything further you wanted to bring, Richard? Okay, so the recommendations then are in 2.1 to agree the changes set out in the body of the report, and that any redundancy and early pension costs that cannot be borne by the Directorate are met from the redundancy and pension reserve. We, as Cabinet, hope that they can be managed within the Directorate, but we recognise that recommendation. So, all in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, can we move on to a suite of Councillor Murphy's reports, the whistleblowing policy. Councillor Phil Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And the purpose of this report is to provide a revised whistleblowing policy applicable to all employees, including those based in schools. And it will replace the current whistleblowing policy. So the recommendation is that the revised policy be accepted and circulated to all staff and commended to governing bodies for adoption as soon as possible. This is an update on the previous policy, It's been in force since 2013, so clearly it needs revision, and it will help to ensure that the council and school governing bodies are committed to achieving the highest possible standards of service and the highest possible ethical standards. So it's designed to ensure that concerns can be raised about wrongdoing or malpractice within the council or school without fear of victimisation, subsequent discrimination, disadvantage or dismissal. And amongst the policy aims, it will provide reassurance that individuals will be protected from possible reprisals or victimisation if a disclosure is made in good faith. So in this policy, there is a definition of whistleblowing as reporting by employees of suspected misconduct, illegal acts, or the failure to act within the council or school. It's quite a comprehensive policy, Leader. It has been consulted upon and is still doing the rounds. It has to be adopted by school governors. If there's any questions, Sally Thomas is here and she'll be pleased to take them.
Thank you, Phil. Colleagues, can I open up? Councillor Bob Greenan.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I notice it is a revised policy, and therefore one assumes that there are some revisions incorporated within from the old policy, but it's not clear from reading it what those revisions and what changes have been made to the policy. There are a few things in bold type, which originally I thought might be the changes, but they only refer to the number of working days, for instance, by which something has to be done. Can you give us a broad outline of what might be the changes that we'll see in this policy? I presume improvements.
Sally Thomas, Interim HR Manager. Thank you for your question. I think the policy, as Councillor Murphy has stated, it's an update. We haven't had an update to this policy for 4 years. So the changes take into account support for individuals, clarifying roles and responsibilities, and taking into account recent WAO advice and guidance and Welsh Government guidance on whistleblowing.
Okay, thank you, Sally. So there's in those specific areas, there's just a little bit more detail around what's required. Okay, right. So colleagues, anything else? No, Dimitri, Simon, Linda.
No, just how is it going to be introduced to the different departments and all employers? That's all, other than just putting it on the website.
Sally.
Thank you for your question. It's very important actually when we have a policy is in terms of how we disseminate, so it's a very important question. We propose to do that by email. We've got an intranet hub, a people services hub, also team meetings and DMTs, HR attend, so we'll be publicising it that way. And of course to schools it goes out via a separate report to governing bodies recommending that governing bodies adopt and share it with their staff.
Thank you, Sally. Okay, the recommendation then is that the revised whistleblowing policy be accepted and circulated to all staff and commended to governing bodies for adoption as soon as possible. All in favour? Thank you very much. On to the attendance management policy. Councillor Phil Murphy again.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And the purpose of this report is more or less the same as the last one, is to provide a revised attendance management policy applicable to all employees, including those based in schools. And so this policy will replace the current policies for corporate staff and those staff employed in schools, as I said. The recommendation is, again, as per the last report, that the policy be accepted and circulated to all staff and commended to governing bodies for adoption as soon as possible. The point is that at the present time, the authority has a management of attendance policies for schools and a separate one in respect of corporate employees. So it makes sense to have one policy which provides effective advice and guidance for all employees, including those who have line management responsibilities. clearly, unless we get a grip on attendance, it has an impact in terms of absence, places considerable burden on work colleagues with increased workloads, productivity is lost, service delivery is affected detrimentally, and as a result, time and money is required to bring in supply cover. So it's very, very important that we not only continue with the grip that we've got, but improve it where it's seen to be lacking. So this revised policy sets out roles and responsibilities, provides a firm framework for managers and head teachers so that there's a consistent support and guidance for their employees. It enables those employees to have a clear understanding of employer expectations and the support mechanisms in place to facilitate a successful return to work. So the policies there, Leader, that's what it's intending to do, to set out a level playing field so everybody is working to the same criteria.
Thank you, Phil. And Sally, I suppose same question as Bob put to you before. I suppose, again, this is, the last report wasn't quite, the last policy wasn't quite doing what we wanted. Clearly, this is a significant improvement, is it?
Yes, we sincerely hope so. The existing policy for corporate staff is very much focused on entitlements. So it sets out a lot of the entitlements, the jargon. This policy is very much a toolkit-based approach. It's received really good feedback from head teachers in terms of them testing the policy, and it's actually a result of a big priority within People Services HR to help to tackle the very important issue of the rising sickness statistics. So in that respect, this policy provides, links to documents such as a workflow, a one-page workflow which provides step-by-step guidance to managers in terms of how to manage absence effectively. Links to, we've produced video tutorials as part of People Services, so managers can access those to know how to report absence correctly. That's very important for us so that we get our statistics accurate. And of course, the all-important training. HR provide regular training workshops that managers have attended. We've had really, really good results on those workshops as well in terms of feedback and the number of managers that are attending that. And this is a key priority for People Services.
I take it that trade unions are also happy with this. Yeah.
Trade unions are very happy. They can see that there's template letters. There is no wriggle room. It's very clear. The procedures are very clearly set out. So they're quite happy. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, colleagues. Anybody? No. Okay. Dimitri.
Yes. The report itself and the way it's set out is good, and it was clear, and I'm sure it would be helpful. But I just wonder, the bigger picture here is, and the cabinet member talked about getting a grip, and the officer talked about there's a spike in illnesses and absences. After we've just had a report where we cut 3 admin staff who are the people who are there who support people presumably who are under more stress now. And I'm just wondering, is this the officer talked about this being able to get a grip of it and helping absences. Is this just a sticking plaster from the actual issue of why there's a spike in stress for staff across the local authority?
Paul, would you like to reflect?
Paul Matthews, Chief Executive. If you were to pose the question to me that you posed, I think, earlier to Sally, what's the difference between this policy and the one that we currently have as our active policy? I say that it balances up rights and responsibilities in a slightly fairer way. I think our current policy is more heavily loaded towards the rights agenda. I think this one builds a little bit more in terms of individuals' responsibilities to us as their employer. I don't think I would go along with the line that Councillor Petruni has just offered. What I would say to you as Cabinet is I think you can expect over the course of the next few months some additional work in this territory. It's very, very important, and I take confidence from the fact that the trade unions are supportive of this position. I think we've tried hard to achieve clarity, because I think often that's a very helpful thing in these situations. But I want the organisation to be as active in wellness as absence. As some of you know, I'm a living example of this at the moment. I'm starting to ask myself questions about whether, as an employer, whether we do enough on the rehabilitation, recuperation agenda. I don't just want to manage people's absence, and I don't just want to think of them on day 1, day 3, day 8, day 10, whenever it might be. I think increasingly we're going to be keen to be saying, how can we help you on day 1? What can we do for you? Absence is an issue for any employer. It certainly is for us. It won't be a surprise to you to know, because we regularly report these numbers to you, that musculoskeletal absence and mental illness absence are probably the strongest features that are currently exhibited to us. I think therefore it behoves us to ask ourselves the question, how better can we help our people recover more quickly? Because I don't think it helps anybody to be absent from work for any longer than they need to be. The whole issue of isolation, sometimes depression, can manifest at speed. So I think what you have here is something that balances rights and responsibilities. I think it delivers clarity, which is welcome, I think, by me as an employer, but also by the trade union movement. But I think it tips its hat to the fact that I think we want to do a lot more on this agenda. For the organisation to be successful, we need motivated people to be with us. It doesn't help individuals, and it doesn't help us if they're not with us.
Thank you for that, Paul. I think that's that's food for thought on how we can actually do more in that regard. So yeah, I welcome that. Simon.
Yeah, I think Paul's touched on the balance, and I think it's probably balanced the other way. It's balanced fairly in the middle. I am really concerned that we do have an unbalance with illness and the types of illness, and that can only be derived from the workload that we are expecting of our employees, and major issues will come along in the next 12 months with budget cuts again. We're going to have to find more, and it means people are going to have to do more. And I do welcome the Chief Executive is saying that we need to do more pieces of work in balancing this. I do welcome that, and I look forward to finding out what they are, because that means we're going to have to do something radically to address that. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you. Linda, anything?
No, it's a very comprehensive report, but when I started working, I had a very good lecture from somebody from HR, and sometimes sickness can always be deemed as a negative, but actually they have always taught me that actually sickness and sickness policy should be a positive in view of the well-being of your staff. And I don't see it very often, but in some pockets, and I don't know if we do it within this area or in any pockets of the departments within the authority, that attendance should be celebrated and not sickness. So having targets for your area and sort of put out what the sickness rates are or what the attendance rates are, and it's very much with regards to accidents, that the departments get rewarded or acknowledged for having, low accidents within their areas. And it goes on the line with sort of what Paul was saying, really, about well-being. And I think in this day and age, different types of illness and sort of what those current trends are. And we, as I say, we have got the duty to everybody within the authority and on people that come into the authority, really, so that they can be safe. We're working even if they're not contracted. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. Okay, I'm going to take us to recommendations then in 2, that the revised attendance management policy be accepted and circulated to all staff and commended to governing bodies for adoption as soon as possible. All in favour of that? Thank you very much. Thank you, Sally. We'll move on to the next report, which is the it came under a separate cover, but I think it may be on ModGov now if any of you are on it, and that is the when I find it here, the Transport Grant and Section 106 schemes. Councillor Brian Jones.
Thank you, Leader. And colleagues, this report is to seek member approval for highway and transportation schemes as part of Welsh Government grants and Section 106 agreements associated with new developments throughout Monmouthshire. The projects are listed there, and I will just go through the big ones. You've got the A466/A40 Weybridge Junction Improvement Scheme, which is designed, the design will be to try and reduce the appalling hold-ups that are there most afternoons, and particularly on Fridays. The Llanfoist Abergavenny Active Travel Bridge, which will improve the lot of people wanting to walk from Llanfoist into Abergavenny, and will be able to do now when this is done in a safe fashion, because at the moment the Llanfoist Bridge is a bit substandard and a bit dangerous for pedestrians. The Abergavenny Town Centre Public Realm Works, which sort of finishing off what we started last year, or what we finished last year, and there's a bit of work to do to link the New Morrison's development up through to Frogmore Street, and that will improve, hopefully, the passage of pedestrians through Abergavenny. There are a few other ones, Wannistow Road, pedestrian crossing, and some road safety stuff. But that's the most of it, and I would ask for approval for this, Leader, as I think it's all quite important stuff for Monmouthshire.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I'm not sure if Roger, is there anything you wish to add at this point?
Roger Hoggins, Head of Operations. Not really, Leader. I'll pick up questions should they arise.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, we welcome the grants and where these are going to be certainly spent. I absolutely concur with the aspirations on Weybridge. We need to be doing something about that, and so I know there's a lot of thought gone into behind these, a lot of public consultation gone in behind these. So happy to support the recommendations here, colleagues. Anybody wish to add? Okay, Dimitri. No, Simon?
Yeah, may I just ask, Leader, do we still have a Section 106 group set up to look at schemes within Monmouthshire, and actually what member involvement's on that?
Yes, Simon, it meets regularly. It has all appropriate officers and member involvement on it, and yes, it's very active. It reviews in quite some detail every 106 agreement, the possibilities of them, how they should be managed, monitors the expenditure on them. So it's a very active working group.
I'm only saying that, Leader, because I never see any minutes of what goes on there and what member involvement is on there, and I actually with the selects or whatever, I never see anything. I know it's economic development select, or was 106s, and probably Section 38 on road, highways, issues with developments, but we never see anything. And I see the consultees on all this, they are none, bar SLT, which is Senior Leadership Team. So what member involvement has been on all these schemes, or have these been ongoing for quite some time? Because quite a considerable amount of money. In the bigger picture there isn't, but there are like nearly 400k on a bridge over the river in Llanfoist. Quite a lot of money to people in Llanfoist, but then to other people that would be a godsend. How do we derive to get there? And I don't see anything to see how we've got there.
Well, I can assure you there is member involvement on that. In the last administration, it was myself, Dave Evans, and Anne Webb. as I say, it is a very well attended, very active and officer intensive committee.
Just to pick up the point on sorry, yeah, Paul.
I was just going to say, Leader, it's possibly worth making the point that particular grouping is an advisory grouping to the executive member. It's not a decision-making grouping. That said, notes that arise from any conversations, meetings, they're perfectly appropriate for other members to have sight of. And I guess I'd also say that might have been the way that it was in the last administration. This current administration might take an entirely different view, and that's for you yet to decide.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, Linda.
No, obviously, sort of welcome these road improvements, which are the, huge issues within the quality of our roads. Just maybe it could be circulated to all new members. It seems to be difficult. We used to have regular updates of what the general sort of road works and where they're going to happen within your area, and so lists of priorities and work's going to go on in a couple of years. That seems to be difficult to obtain these days when being requested. Maybe, with the new council, really new members, that can be recirculated. But sort of, it's welcome some of these monies, but I think sometimes there can be issues which may not sort of highways, not to sort of think in silos, with new estates and things like that. When there are smaller housing developments, quite often the developers will walk away, and then the housing areas, small little housing areas, are left with no road, and road suitable to be adopted for highways. And I just think maybe this term that we can try and tighten up, really. I don't know if with the new planning rules if we can do that, but sort of this goes hand in hand, really. And if the developers upgrade it, it means that we won't have to spend, the 106 monies on it, really.
Okay, thanks. Well, I think that's for a discussion. I'm going to bring Brian in a discussion another day, because it's not what we're charged with looking at immediately today. But do you want to pick up on the highways maintenance? Because I think we get that regularly, don't we?
Yeah, road work reports do come out weekly to a range of different people. I suspect that this is discussion around the high capital maintenance works as well. And annually, officers will provide a list of schemes and roads which are likely to be undertaken in the year. That does get revised as the year goes on, as costs get adjusted, but that is provided every year and is based upon various items which are taken into account in prioritising those works.
And I think that always used to circulate around the area committees as well, didn't it, to get a local dimension on that annual plan. But there is a regular recurring weekly, I think it's a weekly update on where traffic issues are happening. But yeah, well, yeah, and that we just need to that should be working its way around again. I would have thought it's an annual report. Yes.
Yeah, yes, Leader. We've been discussed with officers now. There is to some degree, as last year's brought forward, because not all the works is completed, but a programme does go around annually around this time to identify the members, what works has been undertaken in their wards.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Roger. Okay, so I'm going to move to the recommendations. There's a lot to work through here, so I'm going to probably take them pretty well on block. But just to give, lead into that. So in 2.1, we're asked to approve the set of schemes as was described by the cabinet member, and likewise then 106 schemes for Abergavenny Town Centre, the Morrison Superstore and Washam Highway Road Safety, and others within the county. But as I said, I'll take the recommendations on block. All in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, back to the agenda, and we move on to significant report. Again, Councillor Phil Murphy. It's the Revenue and Capital Monitoring Outturn Report.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And this is the outturn report at period 4, so it reflects the financial year 16-17. As usual, it will do the rounds of select committees, and they'll have the opportunity of examining it to their heart's content, which they always do very effectively. Amongst the recommendations, that members consider the net revenue outturn underspend of 884,000, which is a very substantial improvement on that anticipated at Q3, and represents an incredible amount of work by officers and staff in turning that round. It's also recommended that members consider the capital outturn spend of 40.03 million against the revised budget of 40.98, after taking into account £17.5 million of slippage. It goes on to consider the use of reserves, and that's in 341, but a little bit more on reserves in a minute. And it also supports the apportionment of the general underspend in supplementing reserve levels, and that's set out in 343 below. But principally, 570,000 to the Priority Investment Fund, 114,000 to redundancy and pension reserves, and 100,000 each to the IT transformation and capital receipts regeneration reserve. So that uses up that 884,000. And that is because, of course, that we have a low level of earmarked reserves. It's reducing severely, and also reducing the flexibility that the council has in meeting the challenges going forward. So it is very important that we do retain any surpluses that we manage to achieve, to ensure that we can go on as best we can in the subsequent financial year. There was a significant reduction in the overall school balances at the end of 2016-17 of some 269,000, and we look to support the continuing work with schools to ensure that the council's fairer funding scheme requirements are met, and that the overall school balance remains in positive in 2017-18. And to that extent, the reduction in school overall balances was partly due to governors using reserves heavily in that year, and officers from children and young people are working with schools to help in controlling their budgets. Also looking at the fair funding scheme to see if there are any amendments to that can assist, because we do have a situation where if you go to the list, and I won't read it all out, but it's in the report, Leader, you can see that some schools, principally primary schools, have substantial reserves where the secondary schools don't. Although it's very pleasing to note that Chepstow School looks to be coming back into surplus in the current year. With regards to the revenue position in general, in 312 we set out that table there which shows the situation. If I can just pick out a few highlights there, there's still substantial pressures in children's services, although that did come down a little bit from the previous forecast. But community care has gone up, and there's also pressures in tourism, life and culture. Against that, there was significant savings within interest payable and similar charges, and council tax collection and council tax benefit support contributed substantially to that surplus. So the bottom line situation of 884,000 underspend is a considerably improved position since month 9, and is caused mainly by the reduction in overspend exhibited in the net cost of services. And the surplus on council tax collection, as I mentioned just now, has been maintained as forecast through the year, along with the reduction in the demand for council tax benefits, which has helped the overall position considerably, as you will have seen in that table. So whilst any overall underspend is a pleasing result for the year, it was less than 0.6% variation. So in the size of our budget, a very, very small swing either way can either give us a surplus or a deficit, which would be difficult to manage. And as I said earlier, that's testament to the considerable amount of work which is going on to make sure that we stay the right side of the budget. And if you look at the way that this year panned out against previous ones, you'll see in 315 there the historical progress in managing the budget to try and make sure that we end up in surplus. Redundancy costs are always something which is brought up, and the extent of the redundancy payments made during the year has been set out there, because it does, staffing remains the most significant and controllable expense to most service areas. So we've set out there the redundancy costs for 16-17 and where they fell. So given the financial challenges that will continue to face the authority for the foreseeable future, chief officers continue to be tasked with ensuring that services live within their budgets and savings targets are set for the current financial year. And we'll have seen from the report that my colleague Richard gave earlier on that we're already in some directorates making sure that the savings that they were tasked with are achieved. The summary of the main budget pressures and underspend within the net cost of services is all set out from 319 on, Leader. So rather than go ploughing through that, I'll invite questions.
Thank you very much, Phil. Can I thank all staff who've worked so hard to make sure we pulled the budget back collectively to a modest surplus. However, we know that disguises some significant pressures within adult social care, within education, and it's a salutary reminder of the pressures we're facing and the need for us as a council and administration to wrestle with some big challenges going forward about how we spend the shrinking resource that we are having from Wales Government each year. We mustn't forget that we are the lowest funded authority by miles in Wales, and but we still have an aspiration to provide good, strong, locally accessible services, sustainable services, high quality services, which are going to require us to look at things in different ways. We can see how a budget like adult social care, for instance, that pressure which came through 2 cases alone, put that massive pressure on us, which we have to then deal with. I'm also concerned about the shrinking balances in school reserves, and I think we have to ask some serious questions around how primary schools managing to retain significant balances. Yes, secondary schools are struggling. There is a question to be asked. There's a challenge for us there to address that dilemma. And I think working with schools, I'm sure Richard, working with schools, head teachers and with finance colleagues, that we try to find ways that we can put the all of the finances on a very long-term sustainable footing. It is challenging at the moment with the shrinking resources we get. However, I don't want to detract from the good progress we've made to come in on budget, slightly above, but I just want to make it very clear that this new cabinet, this new Council recognises the challenges we're going to have going forward. It is going to require some significantly challenging decisions, no doubt, in time about how we profile resources going forward. Colleagues, anybody wish to add? Boom.
Yeah, I just really want to concur with what you've just said, Leader, but also to add that within the Enterprise Directorate, things are really tough. We have been expected and we have delivered on major savings over the last few years for the Council, but we are now at the point when we are struggling, frankly, to put it mildly. But we have got some changes that are coming forward, which I'm sure are going to help us greatly. So we've got the alternative delivery model, which there'll be a report on shortly. And we are confident that actually with some changes, but some very difficult decisions, we'll be able to take our services forward into the future. That's not to say that within these figures are some worrying concerns, but I am confident that chief officers and their managers are on top of this and will be working to improve deficits where they exist.
Okay, Dimitri, I don't expect you've got a question, have you?
Oh, yes. Okay. First one, financial overspend. It's good that we got an underspend. But I remember, was it a year, maybe 2 years ago now, time seems to be going quick, Welsh Audit Office criticised this council for being always quite substantially off the mark in terms of this Q4 reporting, in terms of whether it was going to be overspend or underspend. And this time it's, again, completely off the mark in terms of Q3. I know there's a response about certain funding levels come in at Q4, but I wonder why, Welsh Audit Office must be aware of that as well. But I always say that why is the reporting of what our deficit position or underspend position will be always so vastly off? Second question is on 3.1.11. No, 3.3.15, sorry. And that's relating to Tranche A of school funding for 21st century schools. And I note the paragraphs are very written cautiously in the sense of requiring capital receipts to pay for that expenditure, rightly. But I'm wondering if we're very cautious about Tranche A and our ability to fund capital receipts required. What's the reflections on Tranche B? I know it's still further on down the road, I appreciate that, but any indicators about the capital receipts required for Tranche B, so that's renewal of Chepstow and Abergavenny secondary schools. Third question is on community care. I think you answered it actually in your summing up about the two particular cases. Maybe I've got that wrong. And so given it's the level of only 2 cases, I'm not going to go into that too much, but that explains pretty much what's going on. The savings from additional learning needs review, £500,000. The change to the formula, circa £250,000, is that referring to SAPRE and the change of funding on statementing? Is that where the saving is coming from? I just out of interest would like to know if that's what it's about. Yes, and I heard Cabinet Member Greenland talk about enterprise. I just want to know about Caddicot Castle and the significant pressures on Caddicot Castle. I think it says 176k. Given there's a lot of events and I think the desire to generate rightly revenue from those events to offset. A bit greater clarity on why Caddicot Castle is in that position would be great. Really welcomed. And lastly, the thing I've raised ever since I became leader of the Labour group, school funding. And the cuts from the previous Lib Dem Conservative partnership, and I presume the current administration as well, over £3 million, and now the lowest deficit position school balances have had in the last 5 years. was in the paper, black and white there. I remember raising this, because to be fair, it was predicted. I remember raising this at last Cabinet and told, quite firmly that I was talking nonsense and to not scaremonger, and here we are. So now the leader has come to revelation he might need to seriously review school funding. Has he come to the Labour position after 4 years?
Well, thank you very much, Dimitri. A few things there I'm sure a few of us might want to reflect on. We've done our very best in this authority to maintain school funding for many years against the backdrop of your Labour government stealing money away from us, basically, making us the lowest funded authority in Wales. We have been really trying hard, and we've managed to maintain funding as best we can by flatlining. We know that becomes a real term cut. We recognise that. However, other areas are taking even bigger real term cut. That's hence why I said earlier we need to take some really big decisions. We have to align our aspirations along with the funding that your government are giving us, and we've got to, and that's presenting a whole lot of
Sorry, just to be
challenges.
clear, when you said stealing, do you mean that?
Speaking there, sorry.
Do you mean stealing? Do you actually mean that word?
Okay, wrong use of word. But basically, a formula which does not serve this county or other counties like us. A formula which is unfair in its distribution of money, and we hope at some time that the Labour government will recognise the difficulties that authorities like ours are having to manage, and perhaps at some point they will see that, and we will have the recognition required so that we can invest in different ways moving forward. I'm sure others might want to reflect on the issues around the castle and ALN. I'm sure officers want to reflect on ALN. And as for Tranche B funding for the next tranche of secondary schools, I'm certainly still looking forward to hearing what will happen and what the expectation is on match funding going forward. And then we can then start thinking about what we need to do to align to their aspirations and our own. So, colleagues want to pick up Castle, Bob?
Yeah, okay. If you look at the position that Caldicot Castle was in 2-3 years ago, it was horrendous. And all credit to the managers who we've had in place looking after that over the last couple of years. They have turned it round to an extraordinary extent. We were having complaints, quite understandably, from residents in Caldicot about the castle, and now we're getting compliments about the way that the castle is being managed. And of course, we've got, as you mentioned, these large events coming up, which bring further people into the area. Well, not just into that area, into the whole of Monmouthshire through these events, which are major national events coming to us. So, yes, I acknowledge at the moment that there is that deficit of 147, but compared with what we had before and what we could have had we not taken hold of this, I think actually this is a very, very good outcome for that. But we're still working on it, and I think that we will be moving forward on that as much as we possibly can.
Paul, did you want to come in on?
I thought it might be helpful. I think I've got 4 substantive points from Councillor Petruni. I thought I might have a go offering an officer perspective. Clearly, you might have a different view or additional views. On Caldicot Castle, pretty much in the same position as Councillor Greenland. Yes, a deficit in 16-17. I think I'm right in saying it's the smallest deficit that place has had for an incredibly long time. I often, ever since I've been here, I've heard Caldicot Castle described as one of our jewels in our crown. Well, do you know what? I've never felt that way in terms of looking at it as a balance sheet item. It's been well in the liability side of the equation, not the asset. 16-17, I believe, started to change that. I think the events program that we had in 16-17 was disproportionate to anything that I'd observed previously, and we know that the event program that we will see over the coming 2 to 3 months is a step up again. So I believe Caldicot Castle is becoming a facility that we can have hope around for the first time in a long time. But I have to say that will only be based on us continuing to be very, very ambitious in terms of our expectations for that facility. Caldicot Castle needs to be managed as an event facility. It just happens also to be a castle. It happens to be a country park, but actually it's people visiting that generate money, and cups of tea in the coffee shop don't do it, really. It's got to be tens of thousands of people coming over to see something that they want to see. So I think 16-17 was a step forward. We're hoping 17-18 will continue that, and the plan is that 18-19 moves forward again. Then we'll have a trend that can give us some confidence. In terms of quarterly movements, yes, we do have quarterly movements on our monitoring, and Councillor Petruni is right that WAO often make a comment about movements quarter to quarter. Our movement quarter three to outturn is about 0.6% of our budget. I would suggest to you it's not material. It's certainly not fundamental. And a movement of that level is consistent over the 3 years shown to you in this report. And if you go back to earlier years again, you will see a pattern. I think I'm right that as a council, we haven't overspent our budget for, correct me if I'm wrong, 7-8 years. So we have a pattern of sound financial management. And when you're dealing with a quarter three to quarter four variance, you're dealing with the winter. That can make a difference. You're dealing with the odd social care case, which can make quite a significant difference. If we were seeing swings of 2 and 3% of our overall budget, I think I'd be concerned. If we're seeing movements 0.6% beneficially, I'd suggest to you as a cabinet that perhaps you can take some confidence in that. School funding, I think, is an interesting one. I think we've seen some research over the last few days which has demonstrated to us the movements in school balances across Wales. Been a tough year, I think, for school balances. There are some councils in Wales now which don't have school balances. They're in the negative, but a consistent feature of all councils, I believe I'm right in saying, across Wales this year, is that they have seen a reduction in school balances. I think that's the first year in my memory that all councils have seen that pattern. Even having said that, from what I see at the moment, we've probably only got 2 or 3 schools that I would describe as having deficit positions which will start to concern me. We're not looking at an Armageddon platform in any way, shape or form, but I'd expect Cabinet and Council, as it considers its next term's medium-term financial plan, to think about what it wants to do in terms of school funding. Your past medium-term financial plan has been based on, the previous administration's was based on a cash flat line. You have some decisions to take about whether you choose to continue that, whether you choose to have a variable policy between primary and secondary. They're matters for you to address, I think, over the course of the next 3 or 4 months. Tranche B of it is Tranche B, isn't it? I guess I just see it as where we go next on secondary school modernisation. Yes, we have Caldicot opening in a couple of months, which is fantastic. We have Monmouth opening a year after that, which is equally fantastic. Again, Council has got to take a firm position in terms of where it goes next. If I were a betting man, I think I know what the answer would be, and it would be a shame if we can't find a way to continue this pattern that we've now started. Certainly when I start to see the difference in the quality of, it's only accommodation, it's only bricks and mortar at the end of the day, that doesn't make teaching and learning experiences. But when I see the difference cheek by jowl of what new looks like in comparison to what has been, I'd be surprised if the next administration isn't going to want to be as aggressive as the previous one in trying to make sure that there's another step. So I don't know what that will be. That's your policy intent. As officers, we're suspecting that you're going to ask us to work hard on that.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, you're quite right, and that is part of our manifesto. It's part of our commitment to see our continuation of our secondary school rebuild. It's been a fantastic journey we've been on as a council for some 15 years on replacing our school stock, and we're seeing that now emerge through those two fantastic new schools in Caldecott and Monmouth, as you referenced, and we hope to see our next phase rolled out. We just need that. We need the Wales Government to come to some clarity around how they wish to see that. But our commitment, and I hope it's the commitment of other groups, that we can deliver on that pledge for education going forward. And you're quite right. We do need to have a whole look at a whole raft of things, as I tried to indicate at the start of this report, when we construct our medium-term financial plan. How do we balance and manage the growing pressures and demands in other areas at a time where we have shrinking resource? And that's a massive challenge. Mark, please.
If I could just impose, I mean, just to describe the budget monitoring, that at forecast at period 1 you'd expect that to be the same as the outturn, is decrying the fact that actually budget monitoring should be used as a management tool to improve an adverse situation. So I'd expect that if it's worth its salt, it should show an improving position through the year. I mean, if you appreciate at the start of the year, you've got a variety of savings proposals and targets to reach, none of which yet have actually been physically achieved as the year goes on. There's a degree of perspective around what level will be achieved. And when those aren't achieved, there's a need for ad hoc savings through the year. So the budget monitoring model is quite a fluid model. I acknowledge the point that actually the outturn was an £800,000 surplus to the authority, which I think is extremely encouraging. Personally, I thought this might be the year that I missed the mark because it's getting increasingly harder, which endorses your comments that you made this morning. But actually, the suggestion that you can actually set a budget and forget about it rather than monitor it and look at it through the year and try to improve it is probably a bit of a fallacy in today's day and age in scarce resourcing.
And thank you for that, Mark. I do welcome that, and I do welcome the rigour you applied to the budget monitoring and management here, and it's paid off, as we can see over the years. Simon, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I've only got one thing to say is, and my memory's not what it used to be since I turned 30, but I think we must all remember, and I will remind Mark, because Bob was quite right, Bob Hayward, Councillor Hayward, we deferred our payments on our interest here to balance this budget this year of, I think it was £2 million. So let's not be false. Am I right in saying that? Yes, we did. Mark will remind us that this financial year, to set this, we had the discussions quite heavily that to balance the budget, at the start of setting the budget, we had a balance to make of nearly £2 million. And what we've done is we actually deferred payments, interest payments on our borrowing.
If it's yeah, but it's no good you finishing if it's totally wrong. I'd rather it be corrected.
Well, let me finish, and then you tell me whether I'm right or wrong. So
yeah. Okay. Mark, would you want to just address that point, because I don't want a lot of untruths going out.
Let me finish then, and then that means then with 800k savings, but I'll always disagree that we've put that onto our next generation. And finish. Thank you, Lee.
Okay. So can we get some actual clarity of what you were trying to say and what the true position is? Thank you, Mark.
I'll try for both parties. In setting the 2016-17 budget, councillors subscribed to a change in their MRP policy that meant that in setting that budget, we could derive a saving that meant the frontline services were sustained. So that is not part of the overall £800,000 saving, because we've already built that into revising the budget. This year, councillors looked at the supported borrowing calculation, and that will kick in from next year onwards. But in essence, it isn't the effect on the bottom line. The Treasury consequence on the bottom line is as a result of proactive Treasury management, chasing lower interest rates, using internal borrowing to avoid borrowing consequences, and probably also the consequence of capital slippage, because you'll appreciate that a big part of our capital slippage is afforded by borrowing. There would be a presumption at the start of the year that we would have needed to incur that borrowing, and obviously our appropriations, when we're not incurring that borrowing, will be less at the end of the year.
Thank you,
Thank you, Leader. So I was right, really, wasn't I? Thank you.
No, you weren't. No, you weren't. So, Linda?
No, the report shows where the pressures are and sort of where the good work is for officers making those savings, which it's already been iterated that it's very difficult with the officers and the cabinet members. Just one question that I wanted is about EAS and how they made a savings in view of trying to put up education and improving education. Is it admin or and if I know that, the next question would be why can't it be recirculated back into education assessment, EAS?
Thank you, Chair. The benefit from the EAS, which was about £40,000, equated to about, it was a very small element of the money that we provide to them. It was achieved through the EAS being more efficient themselves. And they have, again, this year, made a commitment to being more efficient, and we saw that benefit as it came through our savings for 17-18. They work very hard on that. It doesn't impact in terms of the standard, in terms of the provision they make to our schools or the challenge advisors we work with. It's simply their organisation improving their efficiency as we challenge their board to do as the key commissioning partners.
But my question would be, what did they do to 40,000 is quite a lot, it's quite a lot of books, quite a lot of resources, quite a lot of manpower. What is it?
It's about changing the way that challenge advisors are employed, really, and they use much more peer-to-peer support now, and peer-to-peer support gives better challenge advice, and it also actually comes in and gives savings. But in addition to that, they've invested heavily in some IT kit, which again has brought more efficiency and further savings. And year on year, since the EAS has been in place, it's reduced its budget. And actually, if you think about it, if they're doing a good job, you really don't need quite so much support anyway for schools. So if you get rising standards, you should continue, although they won't exactly agree with this, you should get some falling costs of your service going forward. But where we have particular pressures with, for instance, children in deprivation, which are going to need some more finance, I'm sure, I guess that the shift of money that they have will move to those areas of priority. So I think that the MD of EAS would be very cautious about saying that beyond this year you will find further savings that they are making, but you will find that they are having to invest in areas of priority to get the results up that we are looking for and expecting them to deliver for us.
Okay, thank you very much. One last question from me, because it's in the recommendation to consider about capital. There's 190-something thousand which isn't scheduled or recommended for slippage in Appendix 2. What then happens? Does that mean those projects or wherever that was allocated to, are frozen or put on hold, or what does it mean, Mark?
A large part of that is property maintenance schemes that have been allocated through the year and perhaps with the benefit of hindsight should have been reallocated to other things. If I give you an example, work at a school, if it's significant, should best be done during the holiday periods. Acknowledging that it wasn't done in those holiday periods, that money should have been allocated to the many priorities we've got as a council as the year goes on. There are other aspects around Section 106 funding where I'm suggesting it goes back in the Section 106 pot or the IT reserve for further advancement back to Cabinet and Council in due course in either refreshing costs, where the costs haven't been incurred in the last 4 or 5 years and the budget has just been slipped forward, or by way of actually volunteering alternate priorities to keep the capital programme fresh.
Great, thanks, Mark. I knew there'd be a good answer to it. Okay, so I'm going to take us to recommendations second. Can I again thank everybody for the hard work there? And I know Cabinet colleagues are already meeting with their chief officers to start getting a deeper understanding of those challenges and pressures moving forward. And collectively, we will be working very hard with officers to make sure, we can sustain what's so important in this county, but it won't be the same going forward, I don't think, as it's been in the past. So some challenges ahead. So the recommendations then are as listed in 2.1 through to 2.7, and I won't read through every element of that. There's a significant amount there, and can I ask members to take the recommendations en bloc? All in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, can we go on to another report from Phil, and that is the anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And the purpose of this, like the other two earlier reports, is to update and revise the anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy. It's the previous statement was approved by Cabinet and then Council in 2011. In line with good practice, this should be reviewed and updated periodically, and this is the first review since 2011, so it is due for revision, and the revised policy is shown in Appendix 1. And the statement embodies a series of measures designed to frustrate any attempted fraudulent or corrupt act and the steps to be taken if such action occurs. So in line with good practice and sound governance arrangements, the Council's anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy statement has been updated to incorporate the Fraud Act 2006 and the Bribery Act of 2010. Leader, the reports here, and our Chief Internal Auditor, Andrew Wathen, is also here, who will no doubt be able to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Colleagues, anybody wish to add anything? No? Andrew, is there anything you'd like to say?
Thank you, Leader. Just to add what Councillor Murphy said, and picking up themes from what's already been suggested this afternoon, the main revision incorporates the Bribery Act 2010. The policy better defines the Council's acceptance of zero tolerance towards fraud. It better defines what fraud and corruption actually is, and hopefully gives a better understanding to all that's involved, and more importantly, the consequences of anybody found guilty of fraud and corruption. It better outlines how and who to report fraud to, and it better outlines any allegations, how any allegations are actually dealt with and investigated.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Okay, Simon. No, Linda, anything?
No, I think the policy's clear, really, for everybody to see and read, really, and to be acted upon. I just.
Yep.
How often do we have to use it?
That's a good point. How often is it? Do we have a lot of this through? I suppose a big organisation like this, or not?
Thank you, Leader. Thankfully not. Minimal occurrences during the year. Probably we deal with special investigations within the internal audit team, and it's our responsibility to investigate any allegations of fraud or corruption. We probably deal with half a dozen allegations per annum, and our job is to refute or substantiate that based on the evidence that's provided. So I would say that not all are substantiated, and we deal with them in a consistent manner, but probably maximum of half a dozen per annum.
Thank you. Well, that's reassuring. Okay, so Dimitri, you didn't know you're okay? So the recommendation at 2 is that the revised, gone to wrong one. The revised anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy statement be approved. All in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, let's move us on to the last report, and that is the Welsh Church Fund Working Group. And the purpose of this report is to make the recommendations from that working group to Cabinet here today. And it was the group meeting of the hang on, let me read it right, of the 20th of March. Yes, so the schedule of applications considered are in 2-1, a significant number of those, all for approval, and I won't go through individual reports. Members, you've seen them. Are there any points anybody wants to raise?
Sorry, I just need to declare an interest because I'm a signatory on the first application that's outlined in that.
Okay.
So
So that's Rob.
When you say you're a signatory, Councillor Jones, that you just signed the application, didn't you? Because you are the ward member, I think, for the. Yeah, that's fine. I don't think actually it's necessary to declare an interest there because you are purely, there's a sort of internal process the council uses where the ward member signs off the application, and that's the extent of it, really. Yeah.
Well, that's good advice to remind us all. Thank you, Rob. So the recommendations there before us. We wish all of those projects well. All in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. Can I thank you, everybody, for your contributions, and look forward to future meetings. Now, I'm sure many of us will have a busy day tomorrow, and no doubt that might influence the way things happen in the council going forward. Who knows? Anyway, thank you very much.